Speedrunning is such a common practice throughout video games, and Metroid is no exception. In fact, Super Metroid is one of the most popular games to speedrun, and there's a wide variety of categories. Throughout these categories, thanks to the efforts from the community, there have been found many shortcuts and techniques over the course of multiple years. There could be an entire documental listing and explaining all of the tricks utilized throughout every single category, but today we'll focus on a very special technique, the Golden Torizo Code. First of all, let's see what this glitch is all about. Okay, what just happened? You might not notice anything at first, but if you take a look at the upper menu, you will see how your amount of energy tanks, missiles, super missiles, and power bombs have changed. On top of this, if you go to the menu, you will notice how there are more reserve tanks as well. In fact, the game will grant Samus a total of 7 energy tanks, 3 reserve tanks, 100 missiles, 20 super missiles, 20 power bombs, and every item in the game excluding the screw attack. But how do you do this exactly? Well, to perform this glitch, all you need to do is enter the Golden Torizo room while holding all of the face buttons A, B, X, and Y on the frame that the game checks for the inputs during the horizontal door transition into the room. Furthermore, if you manage to enter the door from the exit, you can still perform this trick. It's also important to note that this trick can only be performed prior to defeating the Golden Torizo, otherwise it won't work. The trick was discovered by runner Jam on November 24, 2010, while looking for the part of the game's code that refills Samus' ammo and energy when moving from Ceres to Sebes. With Caesar's help, they figured out how to activate the code when entering the Golden Torizo's room. It was named Golden Torizo Code after the Golden Torizo, since it can only be performed here. Now onto its gameplay usages. When it comes to its usage and when to perform it, you might think that this is simply a neat trick that you can do once and obtain more items, but it's not that easy. You see, the neat part about Super Metroid is that there isn't a cap as to how many items you can get in the game, since it wasn't intended for players to get more than 100 in the first place, which means that you can easily go over the maximum amount of items. This means that if you were to perform the GT code under specific circumstances, you could very easily go over this cap and obtain more items than intended. But don't be mistaken, this isn't as easy as it seems, since there's a catch here. The game doesn't really grant Samus these items, but rather loads them onto Samus. This means that if you were to have more than these, they will all go down to what the GT code gives you. This might make the GT code not seem that appealing anymore, but if you manage to reach this point, collecting as few items as possible, you will be able to make the most out of this leftover feature. Thanks to the GT code, you gain 7 energy tanks, 3 reserve tanks, 20 missiles, 4 super missiles, 4 power bombs, and the 15 items you can obtain throughout the game minus screw attack, which all adds up to 53%. However, Super Metroid doesn't really track the amount of mandatory items you've collected, like the Morph Ball or the Ice Beam, since you're normally not supposed to obtain more than once. Instead, the game simply tracks the amount of items you've collected for energy tanks, reserve tanks, missiles, super missiles, and power bombs. And since you need to collect a maximum of 1 missile, 1 super missile, and 1 power bomb to reach this point in the game, this means that the most you can get from the GT code is 35%. Because of this, if you were to reach the Golden Torizo room with the minimum amount of items, perform the glitch, and now go back to collect every single upgrade, you'd be able to reach 135%. The Golden Torizo Code is a leftover debug feature left within the game due to an oversight by the developers. In programming, debugging is the means to test out the code, searching for any possible bugs to fix the code, hence the name. There are many ways to debug in video games, and many games have a debugging menu, which allows developers to test out certain things in the game. This proves to come quite in handy in the long run to test the general mechanics of the game. but it might not be as effective for very specific situations, such as boss fights. That is exactly the case for the Golden Torizo Code, which can only be triggered when entering the Golden Torizo fight room, which means that this was definitely used for testing the Golden Torizo fight under circumstances the developers deemed as quote-unquote average. And of course, given how it was found within a speedrunning context, it was bound to be related to it in some shape or form. The main relationship the GTCode has with speedrunning is its multiple categories. There are three main categories regarding the Golden Torizo Code: GT Classic, GT Spacetime or any percent GT, and max percent GT. Starting with GT Classic, despite the discovery of the GT code on late 2010, this category wouldn't be run until a few years later. Here, the goal is simple. You need to defeat all major bosses while utilizing the Golden Torizo Code. In this run, runners obtain super missiles early in Brinstar through the Mock Ball to skip Spore Spawn and defeat Great. However, here's where the route diverges from the usual run, since runners now directly head towards Ridley's Lair. To enter Ridley's Lair, they perform a series of very precise wall jumps that allow Samus to climb her way through this lava pool, barely making it with just enough health thanks to some E-tanks collected along the way. After that, runners later perform what is known as the Green Gate glitch to enter the Golden Torizo room from the other side, which is performed by aiming diagonally upwards and shooting a super missile, picking up some speed beforehand, which will open the door. This only works for gates facing this way. Once in the Screw Attack room, however, runners perform the GT code, deactivate the Spacer Beam to defeat the Golden Torizo without crashing the game, and then defeat the Golden Torizo, then Ridley, Dragoon, and Fentoon in that order. However, another variant would appear around the same time known as the N% GT code or Spacetime GT, which is very similar to the classic GT category. In this category, the goal is to beat the game as fast as possible while using the GT code. The only difference with GT Classic is that you're not required to defeat all bosses to complete the run. The current route is identical to the GT Classic run, except for the Golden Torizo fight. Here, instead of deactivating the Spacer Beam to defeat the Golden Torizo, runners turn off the Wave Beam, creating the Spacetime Beam. The Spacetime Beam has many uses, but here we're interested in two: the Spacetime Reset and the Run Warps. The Spacetime Reset is the Spacetime Beam's main ability, which is to cause everything in the game except your current equipment to reset to its original state. This means that all items and bosses will be able to be collected/killed again respectively, and all doors that did not start out blue will revert to their original state. However, its other usage in speedruns is being able to perform run warps. To summarize run warps, the Spacetime Beam can basically be used to alter the state of the room so that Samus can touch a transition block that will take her elsewhere on Sebes. With this in mind, runners will first use the Spacetime Beam to clip through the door and reset Sebes, and then jump on top of this statue and, selecting super missiles, shoot one, activating the run warp through the door that will teleport Samus all the way back to the gunship. From here, it might seem like the Spacetime Beam is going to be used again, but instead of releasing the beam normally, runners charge up the beam and then they turn off every single beam except for the charge beam, then releasing it. This is a variation of the Spacetime Beam known as the Time Warp. What this does is that once you go into a room's transition, you will be put right into the escape sequence of the game, allowing you to beat the game without having to defeat any boss whatsoever. Finally, the last category run by players is max percent GT code. Here, your goal is to collect 100% of items in the game while also performing the GT code, allowing you to collect 135% of items. The run consists of first going to Crate and then Fentoon collecting as few items as possible, akin to what you normally see in low percent. However, there's one issue here. If you were keen enough, you'd probably realize how during the previous runs, runners had enough health to just barely make it out of the lava dive. But that's not the case here. Instead, there's not enough HP to perform the regular lava dive, and thus runners can either try to go for a faster yet riskier lava dive, or get a gravity suit just to be safe. However, to first get to the gravity suit, you need to go through this particular missile without collecting it, which is normally done with a shine spark. With the gravity suit, runners can perform a trick known as the gravity jump to climb the lava pool, which involves pausing the game and pressing jump as the screen is becoming black. Then you need to remove the gravity suit and exit the pause menu while holding jump. This will give Samus a huge boost in her jump thanks to Super Metroid's physics, because Samus's jumps will be carried with the same speed as if she was wearing the gravity suit, but the deceleration she has without the gravity suit, resulting in a massive boost in height. The run remains identical to any % GT up until the Golden Torizo fight, where runners use the GT code and unequipped Spacer to fight the Golden Torizo. Right after this, they collect the Screw Attack and defeat Ridley, Dragoon, and then go to Turian to defeat Mother Brain, where they perform both the Metroid Skip and Sabotage glitch. The Metroid Skip is simply a way to skip the Metroid from grabbing you through some very precise jumps and positioning, and the Sabotage glitch is a glitch where Samus is able to go through the Sabotage and make the rest of the Sabotages not spawn. The current route, instead of going to Phantom to get the gravity suit, actually made a variation of the lava pool wall jumps with only one energy tank that is faster but extremely precise and actually insane. But despite these three being the three main runs where the GT code is in the spotlight, it's not limited to them, since the GT code actually is utilized in another category, 0%. The goal of 0% is simple: reach the end of the game with the lowest amount of items by any means necessary. The story behind this category and all of the tricks involved could warrant its own video, given its many route changes and depth, so we'll keep things simple and just stick to the GT code. For some context though, in order to achieve the goal of 0%, Samus must utilize the block 0F44, also known as the God block, which can make almost anything happen based on Samus's exposition. But the reason why the GT code is used in 0% is due to the GT code being the fastest way of collecting all mandatory upgrades as fast as possible. Finally, there are some runs that, while there aren't properly run categories, have still been run at some point by different runners. These are either meme runs or task-only categories. 100% GT is a very similar run to Max% GT, where the goal is to complete the game with 100% of items by any means necessary, using the GT code to help. The category originated sometime around 2014, and the first and only run ever was run by runner Overfiend Beep. Here, he runs the category exactly the same as any % GT up until the run warp, where he collects the Screw Attack. Then he does the same run warp to the gunship, but instead of performing the time warp, he changes his trajectory towards Brainstar, more specifically to the Mockboard room, where he uses the Spacetime Beam to collect these 3 items over and over again until he reaches 100%. He then performs the time warp like normal and ends the run with a time of 25 minutes and 53 seconds. Okay, 135% isn't really the maximum amount of items possible. It was discovered that you could reach 136% by skipping power bombs before using the GT code. This requires some minor glitches, but some very precise execution. Thus, the goal of 136% is the same as 135% with the added difficulty of skipping power bombs. The issue with this particular run is that the route itself contains some challenges that must be overcome, namely the yellow door required to get to the Golden Torizo room. To circumvent this, you need to use these enemies in the room to position them in a way that you gain speed while falling, but this is pixel perfect and lasts for more than 5 minutes. After performing this, you should be able to clip through 2 tiles and trigger the transition blocks. After doing this, the rest of the run is identical to 135%. It was first thought to be task only, then PAL only, and an NTSC setup for RTA purposes was not found until March of 2023. Finally, the last run where the GT code is used in is Map Completion GT Code, where runner MM2 NES Cartridge ran the category on November 12, 2022 for the first time. The run follows another very similar run called Map Completion, where runners are tasked with turning all map tiles within the game pink. This run is identical to 135%, except for the fact that after Ridley he went to Phantom and then Dragoon. However, the run still ended with Mother Brain, albeit with less items, since that isn't the goal of this route. And that's every speedrun category this Golden Torizo Code was used in. It's true that its usage within runs makes categories revolve around it, but that's kind of the point of it. For what it's worth, the Golden Torizo Code will always remain a neat piece of trivia that leads to some really interesting runs, and that can be the subject of many thought-provoking conversations. With this in mind, that's everything you need to know about the Golden Torizo Code. If you'd like to see anything on the channel, let me know down in the comments below. I always read them and they make my day. Thank you so much for watching, especially this video in particular, it means the world to me. And lastly, since this video was made to honor Golden Torizo Code's memory, thanks to the collaborative effort of ShinyZeni and the group of amazing people that voluntarily cooperated to make this Memorial Day possible, I'd like to share a few words I prepared for him. A few years ago, when I got into Super Metroid, there were very few channels that actually dedicated its time to post solely about Metroid. And one day, Golden Torizo Code just appeared, and his content was extremely high quality right from the get-go, and his knowledge about Super Metroid was just incredible. I don't think there was a single video where you wouldn't learn something new about the game. We never really got to interact much, but the times that we talked, he was really kind and a great person. And he always tried to show his passion for Super Metroid and speedrunning through his videos. Not only that, but he also posted challenges for people to try out before ultimately posting the solution, bringing the community even closer together. He was definitely one of my biggest inspirations for posting videos, and my first video was actually trying to solve one of his many challenges. I didn't get to solve it, but he still saw the video and congratulated me regardless. And even if it wasn't directly, if it weren't for him, I probably would have never had the courage to ever post another video. He was just amazing. I just hope I could do him justice with this video by showing a different side of Super Metroid with the same love and care that he used to show us in his videos. Thank you for everything, Golden Torizo Code. You will never be forgotten. I've been Ambercore, and it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you.